Yo, what's going on, Dragon Ballers? Welcome back to another Top Cut breakdown video. In today's video, we're going to cover the Most Excellent Gaming Pro Play Tour Qualifier that took place in Connecticut this past weekend. I'm always a little bit hesitant to cover some of the events that are going on with the given state of the world. This was a smaller event. It was 24 players, but I know you guys really do like to see the meta breakdowns, as big or as small as they are, whether they're webcam or IRL. So I did decide to go ahead and do this video. There's a lot of interesting stuff to talk about, especially the fact that I was at this tournament. I did play, and there were a lot of high caliber players. So I think there is good data to pull from. I will probably give a bit more anecdotal evidence here than I do give in previous tournament reports, especially ones that I haven't been able to get to or go to. So look forward to that. I'm going to give you guys some more of my personal experience in this video, but I do think there's still a lot of good data to pull from. So if you guys are new here, definitely subscribe, hit that bell to miss a video. If you guys want to help support the channel, there are many ways down in the description to do so. Particularly today, if you want to compete in events just like this, maybe you're getting ready for the March 5th Pro Play Tour Championship, check out the Patreon down in the description below. It will help you get your game up, think about the game in a more competitive aspect. That being said, let's get started. So the overall representation of the room, like I said, it was a smaller tournament, so it was pretty easy to go around and see what everyone was playing. Shout out to Peter, who judged the event and helped me gather this information. So here we have 3 Vegex, 3 Gotenks, 4 Red Broly. Those were some of the more played decks. Those were the most played decks, as well as 3 Mecha Frieza. So why I kind of went out of order there is because it's kind of interesting, one, that Vegex saw a lot of play at this tournament. Gotenks also saw a lot of play this tournament. I still think Gotenks is a good deck, but I really don't think it's a deck that a lot of people are going to tend to play anymore. And then 4 Red Broly being the most highly represented deck. Again, you got to keep in mind that a lot of players here were from the local area, so that could definitely influence. This isn't going to necessarily be representative of what like the entire United States would play, right? When you think about like sample sizes and science and stuff like that, and different studies and whatnot, you have to keep in mind this is a smaller sample size, and we're not really used to seeing Red Broly taking up so many spots in the overall representation. But it is interesting that it took up so much representation here. I was one of those players, by the way, that played Red Broly. I will have my profile on the channel tomorrow. But anyways, moving along, some other decks that were played. Only 1 Dark Broly. That's another surprising factor there. This has generally been one of the more popular decks in recent tournaments, but for whatever reason, only 1 Dark Broly player was there. He did make it into the top 8. Then we had 1 announcer, very, very cool to see, as well as 1 King Vegeta. King Vegeta is something to look out for because we know King Vegeta is getting direct support in the Evolution Booster set coming out on March 5th. So you're going to want to keep an eye on that. 2 Invoker, also 1 Turles, 1 Vegito Blue, shout out to Miguel, 1 Blue Baby, shout out to Scott Dashy, he made it into top 4. I will also have his profile on the channel this week. 2 Soul Striker, and 1 Agent of Destruction Boo, believe it or not. I actually really like this deck a lot. I think it does have some things it can do in this environment. Unfortunately, did not top though. So once again, shout out to PPG for 1, throwing these events, and for 2, setting up this awesome graphic that just shows us the top 8 of the event. So there were 2 Red Broly, 1 of which did go on to top 4. That was myself. Then we had Blue Baby, again made it to top 4. 1 Dark Broly in top 8, 1 Blue Vegito in top 8. Gotenks also made it to top 4. 1 Mecha Frieza, and then 1 Vegex as well, which did advance into the top 4. So I was kind of just giving you guys the breakdown of the overall top 8, as well as what specifically made it to top 4. And the reason I'm just saying top 4 and not what won the event is because by the time we got to top 4, all the top 4 players agreed to split the top prizing. Most players were just there for their invite to the March 5th tournament, so we didn't really see the need to play out top 4. We kind of split the prizing and called it a day so we could all get home, because it was a 1-day event, and we were playing out Top Cut that same day, so we didn't want to all kind of go home, get on our trips, because I personally had a 2.5-hour drive, so we all kind of agreed just to do that. Anyways, okay, so here we go, talking about the different decks that made it into the top 8. Red Broly, again, very surprising that this was the most highly represented deck in the room, even though I don't think anyone is really contesting how powerful Red Broly is. It is always weird to see that it's not one of the more highly represented decks. It usually does have a pretty low representation. The deck is incredibly powerful. One of the main reasons I played it, and I will talk about this more a bit in my profile tomorrow, is that I really wanted to just play it for a whole tournament, and I wanted to see what is the main reason people aren't playing this deck. One of the things I did come to the conclusion of, your hand size is very, very small compared to all other decks in the format, and that is definitely a fair thing because of we know how powerful Red Broly is. We know how aggressive it is. Having a low hand size definitely seems like a fair trade-off. But I did notice a few times in the tournament that charging was very difficult. Making sure I had my entire chain was very difficult. But I was still able to do very, very well in the tournament, which was definitely a big thing. But one thing I do want to point out, which I did notice quite a bit at the event, one way you can play around Red Broly, and again, not every deck can do this, so that is a little bit unfortunate. But one way you can play around Red Broly is not charging to 3 energy. And 2 decks that can actually do this quite successfully, depending on the context of the game, are definitely Mecha Frieza and Dark Broly. That's definitely some of the reasons why those decks are really, really strong, because they have the capacity to do that, which allows you to play around Red Broly's 6-drop. When they drop the 6-drop, their odds are they're probably winning the game. They're taking 3 cards out of your hand and swinging with a ginormous double strike crit that's going to be very, very hard to defend against. So you are going to want to, you know, in scenarios that you can, avoid charging to 3 if you can maybe win on the clapback the next turn or stall for 1 more turn. Because eventually they're going to get to 4 energy, right? Eventually Red Broly will get to 4 energy, and their 5-drop will allow them to play their 6-drop. But in the meantime, if you just need to make it a few more turns, you know, not charging to 3 and not allowing them to play their 5-drop can definitely help you out. And that more so helps you out if you're going first against Red Broly going second. One thing I do want to mention though, MVP card in the deck that I think is amazing in the sideboard, Piccolo Jr. Descendant of the King. This card arguably makes Red Broly a little bit more unfair because it actually allows Red Broly to play a very, very extended game. I did mention in last week's Top Cut breakdown that I think the triangle currently of the format is Mecha Frieza, Red Broly, Dark Broly. And I did also mention that I think each deck can beat each deck. Comes down to player skill, comes down to deck tech, comes down to card choices, a lot of that stuff. Piccolo Jr. Descendant of the King is one of the cards that really helped me out a lot over the weekend, because Red Broly is generally perceived to be weak against Mecha Frieza, but Piccolo Jr., the auto to pop battle cards when they activate counter, the constant draw, it really did allow me to play an elongated game. So I do want to just, you know, let you guys know that's a card you should expect to see in Red Broly decks that might allow them to play a bit of a slower game. They won't go for that strategy every game. They want to be a really fast, aggressive deck most of the time, but against decks that will slow them down inherently, Piccolo Jr. Descendant of the King is an excellent side deck card. Dark Broly, again, very weird that it was not overly represented. Usually it is, but I mean, again, it was a smaller size tournament, so take that as you will. One thing I do want to mention though, this list was not including Heartfelt Plea, and that kind of opens up a discussion as to whether or not Heartfelt Plea is a staple in Dark Broly or not. I was actually talking to the Dark Broly player at this tournament, and he actually originally had Heartfelt Plea on his deck list, but decided to cut it last minute because he said he didn't have time to actually test the card out and see how it would perform. I totally understand that perspective. Play the deck the way you're comfortable with it, but I think at this point Heartfelt Plea is more of a staple in Dark Broly than anything else. It's very, very easy to get into your red Dark Broly, the Unbridled Destruction. You basically either evolve him on one of your 30Ks, or you can actually play him with the red Parasitic Dragon Ball, because that card actually doesn't specify a 6-drop Dark Broly or a black Dark Broly. It just lets you go right into the red Dark Broly on command, as long as you have the 1-drop in play. So I do think Heartfelt Plea is a staple for that reason. Although I personally side out Heartfelt Plea against Red Broly, because they generally don't give you the time to set that play up. It does take a bit of setup, you know, again, figuring out how you're going to get there, whether you want to tap out on 2, maybe wait to turn 3 to drop Heartfelt Plea with the Unbridled Destruction on board. It is a bit of a decision you have to make, and Red Broly a lot of times can rush you down super fast. So I do side that card out in that matchup, but I don't know, still something to play around with. 2, 3 copies, maybe even 1 copy of Plea. I think it's all good, but we'll have to kind of wait and see how the deck evolves from there. Mecha Frieza, again, one part of the triangle. Honestly though, as time goes on, I am starting to think it's a weaker part of the triangle, and that's maybe just from like a biased standpoint, because I played against 2 Mecha Frieza over the course of the tournament. I did end up winning both of them. Again, I was playing Red Broly, and that's again perceived to be a tough matchup for Red Broly. So it was a bit strange that I was able to, you know, feel like I had a good matchup against Mecha Frieza. But again, that does just speak to my point from before, that I still do think every deck can beat every deck, but there are still, you know, some favors and some disadvantages in that whole thing. The one thing I want to talk about Mecha Frieza here though is the Lord Slug Super Namekian engine. I think the engine is incredibly strong, but I guess I think it's contextually strong. What I mean by that is, it's incredibly good against certain decks, and it's not relevant at all against other decks. So, for example, Mecha Frieza, as far as the triangle goes of Dark Broly, Red Broly, the Lord Slug engine is not particularly great against Dark Broly because they can just swing at this guy with 30Ks, and really, what can you do to defend it? Maybe you can negate once or twice, but after the third, fourth, fifth attack, the Slug is going to die. And then Red Broly just doesn't give you the time to set it up. They're going to be super aggressive with you. They're not going to allow you any time to just like kind of sit back and pay energy for battle cards. So I do want to mention that I think this engine is very lackluster in the triangle, but I think it's very, very good against Rogue. So do you side an entire 8-10 card package to beat Rogue decks? I don't really know. That could be one of the ways that Mecha Frieza kind of innovates from here. Something to definitely look at. But if you guys saw my Patreon profile for this deck, I love the engine. It was in my list, but I have learned since then that it's not great in the main triangle of the format. It is really good against Rogue, though. So take that as you will going forward with whatever tournaments you might be playing in. One Blue Baby, again, made its top 4. Once again, shout out to Scott Dashy. His profile will be on the channel this week. This deck is super cool. Blue does have a lot of good answers for the format, one of which being SS2 Trunks Heroic Prospect. And what's really cool about Baby is their field card allows you to play Trunks for 2 energy as opposed to 3. Every single blue counter in the game, as long as this doesn't have that much specified cost, is allowed to be played for 1 less cost. So Heroic Prospect on turn 2 without actually having unison in play is a really big thing. It's kind of one of the things I think really led to this deck doing so well is that you have a lot of good answers to things. Of course, Godsling Technique Trunks is really great against non-deflect strategies. This deck is really cool. So stay tuned this week if you want to see Scott's profile. Next up, One Blue Vegeta. Shout out to Miguel. So I think this is a good blue pick. A lot of people are talking about how blue is not really playable right now, not that good right now. I do kind of disagree with that. I think there are ways you can build blue to make it work. I think Blue Baby was a good pick on Scott's part. I also think Blue Vegeta is good if we're in more of an aggressive format where Red Bull is doing very, very well. You want to play a deck with a ton of blockers. You want to play a deck that rewards you for blocking and draws you cards and untaps energy. It's a great pick. Xeno Cosmic Unison coming out of set 10 is still proving to be one of the best unisons, at least in blue, or in the game, arguably. It's really, really good. Obviously, gets you extra energy, allows you to board wipe, which actually, funnily enough, I just kind of realized this card does actually also remove field cards. We know that, for instance, like Blue Baby, for example, had the field card. Then also you have things like the new King Vegeta field card and the new Green Broly field card. So that actually just like shores up a lot of rogue matchups, which actually I thought was kind of funny. Something that just kind of clicked in my mind over the course of the weekend. Next up, one Vegex in top 4 as well. This was a very standard Vedex list in the sense that it wasn't playing the Gohank stuff. It was just playing generic black good stuff, all the time maintenance you're used to. I did play against this deck. What I did notice that was new was main deck Son Goku True Fighting Spirit. Just from what I saw in our match, I didn't notice any other new cards per se. But the deck is still very, very strong. The deck still plays free battle cards. I did predict this deck to still be a solid rogue deck. I don't think we'll see it a ton here and there. I think we'll see it top, here and there. I don't think we'll see a ton of people playing this. But True Fighting Spirit, definitely a good main deck call because one, it does offer you Self-Awakening, as where now you've lost Splintering Mind, Mass Sand. You don't have the super easy Self-Awaken anymore. But it does also punish decks using counters. That's going to be particularly good against Mecha Frieza. That deck is full of counters, so you make them warp cards out of their hand. But it could also be good against Red Broly with their Violent Rays. It could also be good against Dark Broly with Protector of the People. So it is a very, very solid card in the meta. And finally, guys, we are talking about Green Gotenks. Again, not a deck that I expect a ton of people to play, but I think it is one of the stronger green decks in this format. But actually, I think there are a lot of good green decks in this format. I think this deck's very playable. I think Clash Fates and or Dredge Goku are very playable. I think Turles is quite good. But I think the key, I think you need to be playing Demigra Unison of Sorcery no matter what green deck you are playing. I think having turn 1 Charismatic Villain, especially against Dark Broly and especially against Red Broly, is just way too important. I think it's honestly a 4-of staple in any green deck. And that's weird in Gotenks because, you awaken with a 2-drop Unison in play, but these aggro decks, they're going to awaken you no matter what. So that doesn't necessarily matter. Play Demigra on 1. It's going to be incredibly good in the format. I can almost guarantee it. But anyways, guys, that's going to wrap up today's video. I do want to know in the comments below what you think. Thanks for watching, and I will see you next time.